It has been some time since I've done one of these, mostly because a former SEAL has been hunting me and still is hunting me. And right now he's setting up something where, it's Ted Cruz, the coward Ted Cruz. I mean, one of the most cowardly fuckers in the whole United States Congress, talking about Biden, i.e., me, sounding weak. If you hadn't figured that out, dipshit, I don't care about sounding. Especially coming from a piece of shit like him. Loves to talk a lot of talk and act all tough, but when it comes down to time to really act, he's a traitorous piece of shit. So Ted Cruz can go shove it up his ass and stick it where the sun doesn't shine because he's a candy ass little fuck knuckle. So continuing, before I get to the main business, there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of as far as what's going on in the world. Right now, Ukraine is doing something that we're not doing. They're taking care of corruption. Get, I kind of view they're a little overzealous, but that's not mine to judge. I didn't think the defense minister needed to go, but apparently the Ukrainians felt he did, so off he goes. Maybe the next guy will know to keep the improper corruption down. You know, the thing they did, especially with that really upset the Ukrainians because of the Vori. That was the holdover from the Soviet Union, which is the thieves in law, taking over and you know not making life miserable, as we're seeing also with what's going on in Mexico with the cartels, especially the Salisco New Generation or whatever. They're just basically a bunch of thuggians who are just stealing everything. So, they got the corruption probe, and you know, it was proper corruption. I.e., you're supposed to be able to. Proper corruption is the people can still kick you out without having to use force. You're trying to kind of play the game. You might be skimming a little bit, but they went overboard. So I can be definitely understood why they were, especially during war, they're trying to save money, and they wanted to show people who are backing them, i.e., us, Europe, the EU, Great Britain, and the United States, that they're using our funds efficiently, and they're kicking the Vori out, and they're maintaining civilization, something we're not doing very well back here at home. But I'll get to that later. So, congratulations on that, as far as Ukraine is concerned. Right now, they're trading space for time. Russia is right now. Let's see here. They're still doing mobilizations. Putin believes as long as he keeps going, everyone's saying that yeah, he's just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. Well, right now he's not pulling people from Moscow. The body bags aren't coming in to change people's mind on this so-called special military operation. And no matter what happens, let's say Putin wins, Moscow wins. So by me winning, first off, he's not going to stop. He's going to try to keep going as far as he can get away with. That's just what all children do. And he thinks he's going to be able to blackmail because the main thing he wants all the the salt mines, basically all of the wants to turn the Sea Azov into a Russian lake, keeping Crimea, and then all of the metal and all of the industrial heartland for himself, and then also then cutting off any, because he was going to he's going to continue on to Odessa. He'll stop for a couple of years and then continue on in another couple of years to Odessa and keep going. He's not going to stop unless he's forced to stop. One of the things it looks like he's going to do is he gets those republics, finishes the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. He'll then say, "Oh, look, the West, they're being unreasonable," and two figures, and then that way you can say to China and the other rogue states, let's get together and we can take out the West and the other stands as well. So he has to be stopped here. Right now, everyone's complaining, why didn't we give Ukraine this and that? We gave Ukraine what they needed at the time they needed, at the same time that they can build their forces to get up to a Western standard military. It just doesn't happen overnight. Russia wants to do a million-man army, and they'll pretty much have that soon, and they'll just throw bodies because they don't have the tanks. So the Leopards will be getting there in about 3 months after training. Then you have another 3 months before proficiency. Then you have the offensive, which may take back whatever little bit they take. And then the Abrams hit around end of this year. Another 3 months proficiency. Right now, for some reason, they're behind Taiwan and somebody else as far as production on the brand new ones. That doesn't make any sense. But I think we can get that production leapfrogged to Ukraine, and then getting while at the same time, because by the time China does its thing, if they are going to jump and get all froggy and go for Taiwan, it won't matter. So might as well get the highest value now and get in production for Ukraine. But that's not here or there for me. Just something that makes sense. Get them into the tanks, and then we can get maneuver warfare going. At that time, we should have drones. Another thing is F-16s not to Ukraine, but to Poland, because they have the pilots, while at the same time we're taking pilots and starting to get them trained up. So by the end of this year, they'll have there's both the Sukhois, and if all the Sukhois are been pushed out and the Sukhoi and the MiGs are all pushed out, and they have new pilots ready to go in the F-16s, then we could with that. So by the time next year or the year after, because it might go to 4 years, and I said at the beginning of this, it's going to be about 3 years. 2 years to hold. Russians are going to lose 1 million people once the body bags start going home. Putin has to then say this whole keep the propaganda going, that it's about the West, that they're blah blah blah. So we're looking at realistically a small counteroffensive this year. What I mean by small, holding back, basically taking back what the Ukrainians are going to have to retreat to trade space for time during the Russians' counteroffensive, taking that back, taking part of the north back, possibly, maybe cutting the land bridge, because they're trying to they've never stopped trying to push the center of the salient to get the Donetsk region. They really want to get into Kramatorsk, and they want to finish taking out the industrial heartland and pretty much everything east of the Dnipro River for the moment, and then they'll keep pushing back on. But cutting the land bridge, hammering the Kursk, or taking out the Kursk bridge proper is something that probably needs to be taken care of. But that's, once again, cutting the supply lines there. They've been given some very good glide bombs, so because they're still using echelon tactics, Putin is wants to get the night or the NVGs we left in Afghanistan, because what they're doing is they're using first, second, and third echelon. The first echelon is just the meat. Second echelon is a little bit less, the more experienced meat, and then the more experienced with NVGs are in the third echelon rotating behind. We start destroying the warehouse stores farther back in in uh in the rear. We can then slow down, just as the HIMARS did before when it came in. Really started stretching out their logistics chains because they're not going to be able to pull these. They're not going to be able to fix their logistics on the fly because they'd have to rebuild. They could build the new trucks because it doesn't take electronics to build the truck, but to build both tanks and trucks, they're really kind of screwed. So the logistics supply lines, we keep stretching them out. The glide bombs are basically GPS and laser guided. We can start taking out trucks, taking out tanks, taking out supply routes in the back. And then we know they're Russians afraid of a looping coming up in the north in the Luhansk region above Liman and then coming down to where they put all of the counter tank stuff, whatever, the Dragon's Teeth. And then as they're going to make that closing in, then they're going to rotate and then try to continue, then sue for peace, and then try to make the West look like we're not being, but we're being unreasonable to draw the Chinese in, whatever. So as of right now, we know the tanks should be getting there. We can definitely start providing maybe the Grey Ghost drones, but as long as because they're farther back, and as they're trading space for time, shouldn't the West is going to get a little people in the West are going to get a little jumpy because the Ukrainians are going to lose a little bit of land for the moment. Hopefully, they don't get overly myopic in Bakhmut, and as long as they're, I hate to say this, getting 6-1, taking out 6 Russians, 6 to 10 Russians for every one Ukrainian, slowly retreating and making them pay, and then taking out vehicles with long-range fires and logistics centers. Then not being too overly worried about becoming myopic. And then I have a feeling once they get to a certain point, then they'll try to open up a third strike back out of Belarus. The feint in the south is not even worth thinking about. It's there to be patiently observed, but the main thing is out of Belarus. They're doing 2 pinning actions, both of the south, but mostly out of Belarus, and then try to complete that salient. Once that encirclement is done, which is the same thing they did in World War II, by Liman down through Bakhmut, then that's when might be a problem coming out of the north. And they might do that as well once they feel the Ukrainians will do their counteroffensive. But if they do rotate out of Belarus, instead of pulling forces, just rotate back down through Liman and then cut them off make them lose the Donetsk region because they cannot maneuver. But that's something gamers that design when you're looking at what's coming online. Instead of before, usually it's half range. This time it's going to be, if you increase the range, you can only do 75%, but you have to then decrease the speed by 25%. If you increase the speed to 75%, you have to decrease the range to 25% in doing your planning. I, everything's getting a little bit more complicated, but what you can come up with now is more important. You is one of the most important things you can do right now. This because right now the Russians, with the help of McRaven, gotta love it, 1%, because he's too busy sitting there trying to keep me pinned in place. And he's done a good job, I must admit. But between him, what is it, Kathleen Kennedy, and what's that dude's Iger, they are real American traitors, without a doubt. So, so as I said, the main thing is getting. We need to get them pilots trained up on MiGs. I mean, you know, F-16s to Poland. Poland will switch out the MiGs. The MiGs get to Ukraine. Ukraine needs to figure out its HR problems, get the right people with the right skill sets in the right areas. Training up a new cadre to take on the F-16s, because that's another year to two. Even if it's compressed, it's still a year. Because combined arms is three dimensions. Well, in our case, it's air, space. Well, space, air, land, water. But in their case, the Ukrainians, we need to get it to air, land, and then within the land airspace, you have your top cover, then your so your fighter pilots, then your bombers, your close air support, and then your drones, which also can have some close air support as well, and then your combined arms on the ground, which is infantry with mechanized infantry, maneuver warfare, and the goal will be to get. That sounds so horrible. To create as many casualties as possible, so Putin has to start pulling people from Moscow. That he can no longer pull men from the West. He has to start pulling them from Moscow, and therefore it'll start working into his base of support. So remember, gamers, once again, we need cover, but instead of doing it where it's only 50% range on whatever systems you have, you're going to do it on across two dimensions. If you can increase the range to 75%, but then you slow down speed to 25% by 50%. So let's say the range is 100 is 10 kilometers. So normally you would say, okay, you can only do 5 kilometers. Well, now you can go 7 point. So let's say you go to 7.5 kilometers. Well, this and say the speed is 10 kilometers. Well, now you can only go. Now you have to lower the speed to 5 kilometers, kind of thing. But if you raise the speed to 7.5 kilometers, then you have to lower the range to 2.5 kilometers on a 10 kilometer thing. So it's gonna be a lot more difficult, but the once again you're providing cover and you're coming up with different ideas and being nimble and fast, and then some maybe slow and fast, and how you structure that out in your structures of is highly important. Once again, drop it in onto Reddit. Good luck. And it is both a defense, and we also do a defensive structure and a offensive structure. And then also, well, I'll come back to that later, because that's in another couple of weeks we'll add another structure to that. One thing at a time. Crawl, walk, run. Now, another thing is right now, the with previously several whiles ago, Crane made a suggestion. Crane creates a sovereign wealth fund, buying three. Uh, the pensioners buy are takes 15% of whatever the pensioner's normal is the floor. So let's say a pensioner makes $30. I know it's not $30, like $300 a month, and 15%. So $45 in whatever. So now what we're going to do is it's going to do a stock split. What we're the goal now, and what we're going to do next, if this has been done, I've assumed it has, but if it hasn't been, well, take it with a grain of salt. Then is to do a stock split. I need a pro forma, two pro formas. One pro forma, as we Americans would say, is sell me a bridge. Absolutely horrible. The second pro forma is a little more reasonable, 10% return. 10% is high. Yeah, 10% returns. It's on the gas fields, the oil fields off of Crimea. All because Putin's really after all of that oil and gas. He's just a gas station, and then the mining fields, if they're not, or whatever new things that are just sitting there. We need to perform on that. The reason is now we're going to do another. You're going to do a stock split, a 2-for-1 stock split. So if you have one, it's going to turn into two, and then you remember 49% is 49 to 50, 47% is for sale. So you do a stock split, and now that other part that is for sale in the open market to non-Ukraine. I mean, well, yeah, the Ukrainians had an option to buy about three. Then you're going to add more shares, right, to the to pile, and you're going to sell after you're doing the stock split for those who've already made their purchase. Add more shares as well. Then the Ukrainians. Some people are thinking you're weak. You're diluting and kind of are diluting their value, but we're actually going to reconstitute that value because the goal is to create more shares in the open market after the pro forma, because you're going to sell those shares through Black American owned banks in the United States. We're not going with Wall Street. They'll snag theirs soon enough in America in America. And the other, once that's done, so it's a same thing with what we did with Ukraine. Only can buy like 3 or 4 shares, $20 a piece, and then you're going to do another stock split and do it again. But this time you're going to go. These black owned banks are then going to sell those shares in Africa. Now, this might be all convoluted. The bankers can figure this out better, but the main goal is twofold. One is you're getting capital from Black African Americans, and they're investing in Ukraine. You're getting capital from South America and these other countries who can they'll split it into partial shares and selling it off through the cell phones. Why? Because if they're invested in your success, they're less likely to back Russia. And the reason that cell phones is because in Africa most of banking is done off of cell phones and sat phones. It's kind of like they've jumped one section, one technology ahead of us in many ways in that respects. And then also you set aside for like a 10%, 10 to 15% set aside for, Royal Dutch Shell, Exxon Mobil, some homegrown companies, so they can buy shares. So that those shares that they buy, they purchase, pays for their capital investment. And that's what sets the floor. You need to set the floor. That 15% sets the floor for how much is it going to cost in capital investment to 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 do the extraction. That's taking it from hydrogen. We pulling oil, hydrogen from the oils, the gas fields, getting that out. How much is it going to cost, and then in that pro forma of that 15% you're selling off. These companies are going to basically buy that shares, and then as the value of the sovereign wealth comes up, those shares actually pay back their capital costs, so it comes out as a wash, or even if they make a profit from buying those shares. So the whole goal is the Western companies that are building out these processes, working with Ukrainian companies, are basically, they're not going to get screwed even if they've paid the capital cost, because they own the shares, and so everything comes out zero, and it's pretty much pure profit from their perspective. Because it's going to take about 4 to 7 years for it to come online. That's what we need the whole perspectives for. So you need to speak with Royal Dutch Shell, ExxonMobil, Sonoco, all the other wildcatters, and all that, and get good perspectives on what this is going to cost, and make sure that we can get these public shares, public international shares out there, so people are invested not just in a hurrah, but just plain old fashioned greed in the Ukraine win. Because one of the things that Putin and China is hoping is that the West will get bored, the video gamers, whatever, how we are, short attention spans, won't won't be able to grind it out for the three, maybe extra year, this year and next year, to get the full win out of Crimea, because we definitely need Crimea, because that oil field out in the sea, in the Black Sea, is just, that's a good money maker, right? And we have the technology to extract it and then hydrogenate some of that. So one of the things I'm thinking is, because we need to build out hydrogen, we know we can do hydrogen from the shale fields. So in our transition to a greener future, we can do hydrogen fuel cells, more electric, as the electric building blocks, and then cleaner fuels. We need to do research on how, so hydrogenate, gasoline, but has 1% hydrogen or 2% hydrogen. How is that going to work within the gasoline? And then as we transition to more electric cars, then those hydrogens we pull out of it, because we got to commoditize all of these sunk costs. So granted, you're not supposed to worry about sunk costs, but let's get real. We're going to be worrying about sunk costs. But if we can turn what is our sunk cost, it becomes a negligible cost, and we can turn those things into hydrogen, and turn those, and then use mass hydrogen fuel cells to charge and create our electrical grids. And then you're also looking at the sodium mines. We're looking at maybe possibly sodium batteries, things like that. So there's a lot of potential, minus as far as industrial production, that can be invested in, and the global populace, the average Joe, has a stake in the game. Therefore, keeping the eyes on Ukraine, because it's affecting their bottom line, basically their pocket and their long-term future, even if it's a little bit. So that's that. As I said, the bankers will figure that out, but it does have to be through Black African American banks, because, well, it'll just piss off Wall Street. And two, it's just a smarter move, especially with the situations going on now that are about to come down. Now, now the situation is with McRaven and Stradvitas and Papadopoulos or whatever his name is, the former CIA chief, because they all three are working together. And that's where the thing with, you know, what's his name? Cruz was babbling about looking weak. Because what he's trying to do is walk me into basically doing a homicide on McRaven. No, I don't have to do a homicide on him. He'll do it himself. He'll walk his ass into that. Because um, we don't. What is it? We don't negotiate with terrorists. And McRaven's and Stavridis and whatever his name is are acting as terrorists. They are attacking the EU. They are attacking Great Britain. And you're saying, well, how are they doing that? Well, they're attacking me. They're terrorizing me. And everyone's watching. So you can't say they're not. They have attempted to, in multiple times, try to make it look like they're not trying to run an assassination, but they have totally been the whole time. Now, Cruz is trying to do that so that way I would lose my citizenship, but I'm not going to lose my citizenship. And then he can make up a fuss back home in Texas. But the problem that Cruz is going to be facing is he's going to be having to cover his own ass more so. And we'll get to that in a bit. But for the moment, yeah, that's another thing coming. That candy ass coward. Because the other thing is, you don't steal from the royal house. That that's a terrorist act, and that's once again also affects what is it? Treaties, and that's an attack on one. That's which is an attack on all. And you might be asking, he didn't steal anything. Oh yes, he did. And he stole my walking stick, my original Jamaican passport, $400 check, and everyone's been watching him absolutely harass me and terrorize me, and then also trying to kill me, but trying to make it look like it's either an accident or it's using the pheromones and something else within the pheromones because they took a DNA sample, so I know they've tweaked it to my DNA. It's actually breaking down my body. I have to keep cleaning it out. Like I clean it out, and then the fuckers will come back in and they'll do it again, and it's just so it's yeah done on purpose. So not as dramatic as using plutonium or whatever the hell Putin did, but it's just as effective. Also, the illegal steering by Matt Hellenide, and the defamation and libel, as well as theft by Jay Z of monies from me because they paid Jay-Z out of the capital that they were supposedly raising under my name, using my name and likeness for capital creation. So therefore, they've stolen from me. Once again, breaking treaties. We'll get to that breaking treaties in a little bit. So, with that said, Admiral Osi, I hope your team is ready. But I need my walking stick back, my original Jamaican passport, my check, and then from Matt Tellionide, or whatever, the guy from who owns RPM now, I need my 40K for illegally using my name and harassing me, plus 100K for another 50K for steering, for illegally steering me, plus a lease. In the 6-month lease, I only pay 10% of market rents plus $50 for utilities. If he doesn't want to do the lease, then it's 40K for the amount that I paid to be harassed, 150,000, and then 100K for steering. Because that's going to be a lot less than what happens if I take him to court. And he's going to need a day. So this needs to be all finalized by Wednesday morning. I need my walking stick. It needs to be in one piece. If it is not in one piece or broken, that individual, who I know everybody knows who it is, needs to go to jail for theft and destruction of royal property and breaking of treaties between the United States and Great Britain. And so does McRaven for ordering it, just as it would happen with any RICO or any type of organized crime. Because this is basically what this is: organized terroristic crime. I love how the fact everyone talks about in movies, oh, we want a gig, we want this. No, you guys don't. No, you don't. But anywho, it's fun to think Americans want that. Something they don't want. As far as Admiral Stavridis, Admiral Osi, I leave that up to you and the admirals. Understand this: all the admirals and especially the SEALs have been put. SEAL admirals been put there by McRaven, so they're not loyal to you. They're not even loyal to the Constitution. And a lot of the admirals of the line, the seafaring admirals, same as well. Stavridis thinks he was just going to get away with it. Yeah, nah. He's the one who's pulling all the strings. You know, Bob Iger took over Disney, right? Well, it was Stavridis working with the hedge funds that tanked the stock so that way they can kick JPEG out. Iger comes back in. Now he's working with Kathleen Kennedy. They work as this site, it's called a dyad thing they call. It's just basically two psychopaths bouncing back and forth. And then told JPEG, oh, you didn't have emotional intelligence, which was a bunch of BS. He's just going to use everything that JPEG used, and then he's going to take credit for it. Pure power play, but it's knowing what's going on. And that's Stavridis all the way. And then Papa, or whatever his name, the old CIA guy, you need to figure out, he needs to tell you who is the fourth man. Who is the Russian spy on the 7th floor? Because they transfer it as they move on. Right now, Putin is just thinks America's weak. We talk a good game about equality and all this other stuff, but to him we're just weak because we don't back up what we say. Trump attempted to overthrow the Constitution. He hasn't been held to an account. The Neither has the senators and congresspersons who did not vote to impeach him. And also the ones such as Ted Cruz who are actually actively working to overthrow the Constitution in an active coup. And they can say we were just doing some. No, the foot soldiers have been tried in court for insurrection. Period. Full stop. People who planned it, Ted Cruz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, are still in Congress, still in the Senate. Unacceptable. Putin, Xi, the rest of the world is just there going, what the hell's wrong with you guys? You talk about democracy. Hey, we can go fucking stick it where the sun doesn't shine from their perspective. Don't blame them either. Don't blame them one bit. Talk about hypocritical. So, I need my walking stick. He has until Wednesday morning, sunrise. You pick whatever, Eastern Standard Time, Mountain Standard Time. I don't care. Sunrise someplace within the United States. At that time, because in order to not go to war with NATO, it is highly suggested MI6, EU, security services, Germany, Ukraine, Netherlands, Japan, even though they're not EU, they remove a rogue admiral who is attempting to overthrow the United States government, the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, what you do with Stavridis, because he is, once again, pulling the strings, but it's not as blatant, that's up to you. See, Ted Cruz is trying to get me to say, by my command, and tell MI6 that they have to do so. I'm going to do so. He's not where it could be blatant recorded. Not that stupid. That's a line I have to walk. But by the same token, I really don't. Diplomatic immunity. Now you can kick me out, but then you run into a problem. But Ted Cruz has his own problems. Well, he's about to find that out. You see, Leader Schumer said, oh, anything radical will be stopped within the Senate. As far as, because, the 1% paid off Jay-Z to not uphold the Constitution, sell out his people. Here's the radical thing there, Leader Schumer. I was expecting you to be chummy, all play chummy chummy. We're both about the same intelligence factor. And you did exactly that. Bunch of Caucasian men covering another Caucasian man's ass for Trump didn't overthrow the Constitution. You did not do your job. See, the way the Constitution is written, and when you look at, actually read their writings, the Constitution is designed to keep insurrections at bay because they're having them all the flipping time. And they gave conciliations to the South to maintain slavery. You know, the Abernathys of Georgia. I love it. That peculiar institution. But the main thing of the Constitution, when you actually read it and not do a lot of BSing, was to keep insurrections down. The structure of the fact that the president can't go, or his agents cannot step foot onto the Capitol, is part of that. You have active members of Congress and the Senate who actively participated in an insurrection. And under the 14th Amendment, you're supposed to hold them to an account. Now, you're all chumming, having their little breakfast, whatever, with at the time Speaker Pelosi, and she thought you were full of shit. She couldn't stand what you were doing. But she was polite. But I'm not so polite about it. The Constitution, by precedent, is no longer. What did Benjamin Franklin said? We gave you a republic if you can keep it. You forgot you work for us, not the other way around. We, the people, own this country. Not the 1%, but every individual American. It took a long time to get to that point. Before it was just, of course, Caucasian men who were landowners. Basically, people who could actually read a contract. I can read a contract. And you can do all the courts bullshit all you want, but especially if you want to be originalist, it's a contract. And I spent many a day in my youth breaking apart sentences before I started learning how to do high-powered logic. I can read a contract. And you are in breach of that contract. For the moment. You're supposed to hold the President of the United States to an account for attempting to overthrow the Constitution. But Mitch McConnell punted because he wants the Constitution to be overthrown. And said, well, the executive branch will take care of it. No. That's not the executive branch's problem. So I don't, well, because I could keep that certain, yeah, frickin', you traitor. And then you got a bunch of Caucasian men doing a Caucasian men thing. Same shit that happened after the Civil War. Instead of following through, got around and circle jerked each other. And who took the brunt of that? Besides black Americans, the working class, Caucasians. Not this time. Not this time. Too much is at stake. Because right now, we don't have any moral authority throughout the world. We are nothing more than a bunch of thuggians if we say shit. The world's being polite because of Ukraine and not saying anything. The world's being polite and not saying anything. But the reality is, we have nothing to stand upon. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if that is somebody asked them to call at this point in time because they usually call earlier. They don't call this time. There are rhythms in everything. See, the 1% and McRaven are so busy trying to kill me because they know everything I'm saying is right. They know I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to back down. They know that he knows he's a traitor. And what he's going to then try to do, is, as bigots do, get everyone all riled up. They've already done that, trying to do that around here where I'm at. Get the Caucasians all riled up to cover their ass. That's what they usually do. Same thing his little mini me does. But not this time. These bigots aren't getting away with this. The 1% is not going to destroy this country and destroy this world. Evil will be stopped. And they're saying they're calling me evil. That's fine. I don't care. But they know that they're evil. Because they're just trying to take, not create. So, Jay-Z, just like McRaven, you took money from me. It means you're a terrorist, just as McRaven is. He's now going to be labeled, he's labeled as a terrorist by the British government and the EU, which means he's a terrorist by the United States. Because what? You attacked the United States. You attacked Great Britain. You're stealing from Great Britain. When it sinks in, it'll make more sense. But right now, it doesn't make any sense. I don't care. So here's the thing. I need my money. You can keep 25%, well, for now. Every day that you don't pay me, it's 5% down. One day it's 20%. Day after that it's 15%. All the way down until it's zero. And you owe me 100% of what they paid you. And at that point, when it's zero, right now you're nothing. You're just somebody who made a mistake. And I know you're hard headed, so you're going to be, I don't got to do shit, nigga, blah, blah, blah. Go fuck yourself. You are a criminal and head of a criminal organization. Who is terrorizing the British state on the behalf of racist bigots, private entities, So therefore, you're a terrorist once it gets to zero. And the EU and Great Britain and the United States do not negotiate with terrorists. We hunt them. And you will say, well, all my money is going to protect me. Accidents happen. We can't allow you to think you're above civilization. So, the other thing you're going to do is, let's see here, 20th, you need to get 1 million people to DC by the 20th of February. And they got to be willing to stay there for at least 2 to 3 weeks to force the hand of the Senate and the House of Representatives. See, Madam Speaker, well, Leader Hakeem Jeffries is going to figure out, with the guidance of Madam Pelosi, of how to hold and remove and impeach those persons who actively participated in the insurrection and planning and who did not vote to impeach the former president via the 14th Amendment, like they were supposed to back last year, that they paid you to keep black Americans in their home. And you're going to force Chuck Schumer's hand to do the same in the Senate. Mitch McConnell will no longer be part of the Senate. Because if he had done his constitutional duty, he wouldn't even have to worry about the headache that Donald Trump is presenting, or the MAGA movement is presenting. But he didn't do what he is supposed to do under the Constitution of the United States. So his top 3 people are going to be removed. And that would include, his top 3 people plus the persons who actively participated in the planning of the insurrection. And guess who that includes? One jackass of a senator that nobody can stand from Texas. I think his name's Ted Cruz. Then what you're going to do, you're both going to work this all together. And once you kick these idiots out of Congress, you're going to pass voting rights, police reform, and the Build Back Better. Not the BS that Manchin pulled, but an actual bill that actually serves all Americans, not his little chum buddies that enslaves Americans. Because what he did is he pulled a little bit and go, here's something, Joe. It keeps the niggers in their place. I'm so clever. Motherfucker. Meanwhile, he's screwing, keeping West Virginians poor, then blaming it on black folks. But they get a little bit of motion. How about we pay them first, and then they can go back to hating the niggers? I don't really care. But we're not with this whole thing about being a poor country. Nah, fuck that. That's over. Because all that leads to is the shit we're seeing down in Mexico. The cartels, the criminal organizations run everything. Let's be real, nobody wants to live like that. That's not why we build civilizations. We build civilizations, one for power, don't get me wrong, but we keep the riffraff as riffraff. And the thing about the civilization where people own it, as opposed to, like I said, we're royalty, we're the original gangsters, is we make sure that we keep those who think they're going to be overthrowing shit to the curb. So you see, Jay-Z, you need to get these people to since you think you run shit, you need to get, right now, the dark side of the economy is running 50% of 55% of GDP. That's no go. That needs to get switched down to about 45% of GDP, and the regular side of the economy, the reason we created civilization and the rule of law, that needs to get to 55%. In order to do that, first steps, we need voting rights. We need police reform. And we need investment so people have something. Because theft doesn't create more, it takes, so it destroys everything. You need something to build before you can even steal from it. The irony is, a stronger economy means more money to be taken in a twisted kind of sense. You've denied your people the opportunity of 400 years. You know what? I wouldn't even need. Well, no, black Americans are weak. But you're going to bring not just black Americans, you're going to bring working class Americans. You're going to bring everybody together. Quit your whining. Oh, you just don't understand. Fuck you. February 20th. Have it figured out. People take their days off, whatever it takes. The American workers need to retake this country. And the way they do it is hold Congress to the account and remind them who they work for. And that their job is to uphold the Constitution, not circle jerk each other. And then when it's done, because see, what they were planning on doing is keeping everything open so that way the precedents to overthrow the Constitution are there for later on. That's why McRaven did his little thing. You were doing your thing with Georgia, and well, McRaven was figuring out how he can make it look like him and Stavridis could make it look like, oh, they brought the country together. That whole elevate certain people's just basically data gathering. And meanwhile, you're trying to throw me under the bus. Screw Stacey Abrams. Speaking of which, Miss Abrams and Senator Warnock, you need to be working with Mitt Romney and Bernie Sanders to have the legislation ready to go. Because the window will be very tight. Just like they did with the Patriot Act to destroy the Fourth Amendment, we're going to shove it down their throats. Once this is done long term, we need to buy 33% of the Fed. Oh boy, you can hear the bankers freaking howl now. Jefferson was always against a central bank. And here's the reason, because the bankers are ripping us off. Talking about audit the Fed, screw that. We should be owning the Fed. They actually think they print our money. They try to tell us what to do. No, that's not how it's going to work. It used to be Treasury notes, not Federal Reserve notes. So since it's fractional reserve, and they view every American person as just a value piece, well, we need to own 33% of the Fed as the fractional reserve, and we're only going to pay in $1910 or whatever. We'll take it through eminent domain. So that's another fight for down the road. The other thing we got to worry about is, like I said before, we're looking at 90 days for training. In Ukraine, we got 90 days before we get for training, then 90 days to get up to speed. That's 180 days out. So we're looking at late spring, a spring offensive, and then really a decent, strong offensive by fall. Then you're going to get your next winter's slog, and then fully recapturing Crimea sometime next year, or the spring, fall, and then another slog maybe into the year after. But by that time, the Ukrainian army will be completely westernized. And we will be starting the rebuilding process. And the Russian Federation will either probably be no more, or we'll be in the middle of World War III. One of the two. All depends on what the Chinese are going to do, if they're going to get all froggy. And to deter the, speaking of which, Senator Sanders, we need to also, within the Build Back Better, add into the fact that the Arleigh Burkes are built out, the DDGs. We need to have a new cruiser and destroyer force, and they should have something set up. What they've learned with the Zumwalts, and we need to get that a new platform built out if we're going to keep navigation of the seas open for free trade, even if it's regional. We put a lot of money into our carriers, but if the carriers got to have destroyers and cruisers around them, so we need to kind of get that up and running. And then we need Coast Guard cutters for maritime. And then another one I think that you'll probably is, we need to reinvest in the AmeriCorps and the Peace Corps. Give kids something besides military to learn the system. Do your 2 or 3 years, do some good, learn how to to operate the country, get valuable experience, build a better world. Take that youthful exuberance. Also, for those who don't come from Ivy League schools, it also helps them create networks. doing good while doing good. So we need to reinvest in those two areas when you're doing the Build Back Better. Also, need to increase NASA's budget by 5%. Research hydrogen fuels. How do we go? How do we what's it going to do with? So we can pull the hydrogen out of the hydrocarbons. We can mix it into our fuels as we transition. So how do we go? So that is it cleaner? How do we, if we, 3% hydrogenation, how does that affect where we're at? Does it lower things? Then how do we then transfer that into hydrogen fuel cells to either create electricity through either burning it, through hydrolysis, or not hydrolysis, but you know what I mean, to the hydrogen fuel cell, large scale, or using it in our power plants. And then how do we build out our electrical infrastructure to handle that extra current and electricity generation necessary? Then sodium batteries, that little sprinkling of whatever that McMansion was doing. No. The kids expect more. I was reading something, they're not sure if Kamala Harris will be able to, if Joe doesn't run, Kamala Harris will be able to hold the ticket. Okay, the whole reason of this, the excuse they gave for screwing over black Americans is, well, we'll just keep, stringing me along, and he's going to keep playing for 2 years, and then we're going to kill him when he's done. But they didn't say that last part out loud, at least. So that way I get Joe elected. But I ain't playing that game. Because I know, and I get it. It's the same thing that happened. If you get Build Back Better now, you won't get it later. Well, the actual reality is they don't want you to have it later. Manchin's little watered down whatever. Here's a 1/10, even less than 1/10 of something. Here's a little nibble. Here's a little breadcrumb that really doesn't do anything except puts money in my buddy's pockets. I guess that's proper corruption. Meanwhile, the Constitution's in tatters. And the 1% keeps strip mining the work of everybody. And the city on the hill is no more. Because what happens is somebody starts thinking that they can be king or queen. And that shit never works out. We in Great Britain have kind of sort of worked that out, but a lot of it has to do in the modern era is because of America. And also Queen Elizabeth was quite clever. But we're not a lot of monarchs are that clever or that wise. That is for damn sure. The other thing is we need to increase the judiciary. Common person does not. The big corporations use it as we see with Trump, use the judiciary as a cudgel to get away with things. Stretch things out for 3 to 5 years, so by the time you're done, no, we can't have that anymore. We need to increase the judiciary. And it'll also water down Mitch McConnell's horrible, horrible things he's put in, all the white nationalists he's put into the judiciary to tear down the Constitution. So, Bernie, you got your work cut out for you. Mitt, this is your chance. Prove the Mormons really are for the Constitution. Senator Warnock, Stacey Abrams, Black Americans keep babbling to me, oh, they want a seat at the table. You didn't bring anything to the table. You don't come to the Thanksgiving dinner empty-handed and then think you're going to eat everything up. $7 trillion. Rebuild your neighborhoods. Make sure the money's going in the right way. Make sure there's checks and balances so what they did in Mississippi doesn't happen, or that there's ways you can sue them and get the money back into the correct places. You can see what Mitch McConnell and Manchin do. Can't let that happen. You got to stop that. You want a seat at the table, you got to bring something to the table. $7 trillion over 10 years. And after 10 years, people are going to get used to that, and this is what they're afraid of. 10 years, oh gosh. Living in a good society, people can, feed their families, have a little bit left over. Work hard to dream a dream. But that's the thing these bigots are afraid of, because they really don't know how to make money. Once they get to a certain point, a lot of these one percenters are pretty much the biggest welfare queens on the planet. The tumble is our safety. The idea that you can make it, maybe, yeah, I made it this generation, and maybe the next generation can keep a hold of it. The hard work and grit. Or maybe they're just a bunch of dipshits and they lose it all. Usually it's the latter. But hey. They love to talk about Darwinian, but except, that's not for us. Right. Well, now I'm to the point that everyone's been waiting for. See, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth had, when I asked, hey man, just could you not kill me? I'm kind of cool with that whole living thing. I made a statement saying I was going to do this as an American. Basically, I ain't running over to Europe. Now, the 1% and King Charles are trying to do with the mechanics, because my original person who entered me in, who accepted me free, he passed, and I haven't been paying dues, whatever. But once you're in technically. Just got to catch up on your dues, I guess. And it would be to their stupidity, actually, if they were to play that game. because mechanics are what's called a friendly society, built and under the auspice of Parliament. So they're beholden to Parliament, and Parliament is beholden to them, actually. So if mechanics, some of the mechanics will probably say, well, he has to do this, and he has, no, don't have to check. Because if you don't uphold the contract, you've dissolved yourself. You don't uphold my membership, you've dissolved yourself. Which also means you've dissolved Parliament. That's the other thing. So Parliament has to uphold the contract, or they've dissolved themselves, because it's a contract with a mechanic, which means it's a contract with Parliament. But then the ladies and lords have this problem because that's the crown they have to deal with. Well, even though as a mechanic you're also part of the crown, but the problem with that is by chain of title and blood right, unlike where Lady Markle has just received her title, my title is a chain of title, so it is a continuation of the crown. Continuation. In other words, continuation of royal title. Which means it is the same as a contract with the state. So the contract is both with Parliament and the state. So you see, McRaven harassing me is harassing the state. Terrorizing me is terrorizing the state. So yes, I can say by my command, MI6, you need to remove McRaven after Wednesday if Admiral Losey cannot remove you from this plane of existence if you do not return to me my effects as listed and stated. But for that to happen, I have to accept the continuation of title. And you're saying continuation of title? Yes. You're landowners. Dolores held on to the land. She held on to her title. So, by chain of title, His Royal Highness or Master Reginald Silvera of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and Spanish Town, Jamaica, West Indies, as my grandfather. And by continuation of chain of title, by Her Royal Highness or Mistress Catherine Aileen Dolores Hemley, Dolores Silvera, Catherine Aileen Dolores Silvera Hemley of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and Spanish Town, Jamaica, West Indies. I, Ebaton Kirkpatrick Jackson, United States Army and Navy veteran, and voting citizen of the United States of America, of Colorado 3rd Congressional District, accepts, as conferred by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and her other realms and territories, Queen, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith. I, Ebaton Kirkpatrick Jackson, of the United States, veteran of the United States Army and the veteran of the United States Navy, voting citizen of the Colorado 3rd Congressional District of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, the Commonwealth of Nations, Kingston and Spanish Town, Jamaica, West Indies, do hereby accept the title conferred Duke of Edinburgh of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and the Commonwealth of Nations. May God have mercy on my soul. And may I be able to live to the weight of the responsibility conferred. To which that responsibility is to create in Her Majesty's name an investment vehicle for the House of Windsor and the Crown Estates. Determine whom within the 1% are attempting to overthrow the Crown and the Constitution of the United States of America and the European Union. I accept this responsibility freely, of my own will, in body and mind. And spirit and soul. Admiral Osi, you have until Wednesday morning, sunrise, to deliver my effects. My walking stick in one piece. If it is broken, the individual who broke it is sent to jail. My original Jamaican passport. $400 from Miss Roxanne, which is my mail that was stolen. And the $200,000 from Matt Tillingid of RPM Now. since McRaven was the one who informed him, or contract as, a lease or whatever, since McRaven was the one who informed him that his behavior was acceptable, and they were working in conjunction. What you do with Stavridis and the CIA director, that is up to you. And also understand the artist, an individual known as Jay-Z, will have until the end of the week. He has 5 days to return the money that was stolen from me and the crown, or he'll be labeled as a terrorist for theft of royal property. And Mr. Jay-Z has to deliver voting rights, police reform, and the Build Back Better Act law by forcing Congress, by getting both the working class, Caucasians of all, and persons of all stripes, and black African Americans to DC and throughout the world to hold Congress to account, to reset precedent that Congress upholds the Constitution by removing at least the heads of those who did not vote to hold the former president accountable for trying to overthrow the Constitution, and those members of Congress and the Senate who planned the insurrection. If not so, Mr. Jay-Z will, if these things are not met, both Mr. McRaven and Mr. Jay-Z will be considered terrorists to the state of Great Britain, of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, Commonwealth of Nations, and all treaties it has with other countries, to include NATO, the United States. And probably Japan as well. May God have mercy on our souls. May God bless America. May God save the king, if he's not stupid.